What happens when your worst fear becomes your reality? Hi, I'm Brent Cassidy. Welcome to the Nightmare Success In and Out podcast, where we explore how to overcome your fears and nightmares and set yourself free. We're going to be exploring this topic with guys I was in Leavenworth with and others who survived their own nightmare. These stories can be inspiring, sometimes sad. There's some humor, but hopefully you can come away with a nugget of something that'll help you knock down some of the prisons you built up in your own mind. All right, Nightmare Success listeners, we're back. And I know you guys come here for the good stuff with the good people that have got great stories. You know, it's all about what happens when your worst fear becomes your reality. How do you adapt? How do you survive? How do you overcome and set yourself free? I've got that kind of guest today. His name's Danny Navarro. I guess if we were going to name this, it would be Prison to Real Estate World. I mean, this guy 10 years ago came out and, you know, grew up in a tough neighborhood, grew into really a family and friends that were all around, sixth grade. He was pushed into the world of walking the streets and with drug dealing and gangs. And 18 years old, Danny is sentenced to a mandatory minimum of 10 years. And then what happens when he comes out? It's all about that inspiring stuff of mindset. You know, how do you overcome? How do you get what you want? How do you stay with it? How do you stay tenacious? We're going to get into all that. And I'm excited to unpack this today, to hear this story. Before we do that, I want to jump in to intro our new sponsor for the show, Auto Plaza Direct. You know, who likes spending a couple of weekends walking the lots looking for a car? Then you spend like 4 to 5 hours in the dealership just to try to buy that car. And it's kind of like a trip to the dentist. Well, there's a better way to take all this pain and hassle away getting a car. Auto Plaza Direct. They're your personal car concierge. Just let them know what you want, what you can pay, and they'll go out and find that car for you. They'll negotiate the best price and deliver that car to you in any state. They also offer warranties and financing, full service. Go to Auto Plaza Direct to get started with your personal car concierge, the new hassle-free way, the car buying experience you deserve. AutoPlazaDirect.com. Tell them that Brent from Nightmare Success sent you. All right, folks, here we go. Danny, welcome in, my man.
Thank you for having me today.
So I did a little bit this morning watching you on Prison Professors, and your story is just, I don't know, it's kind of one of those stories, everybody loves a good comeback, great comeback story. It's like, somebody gets knocked down and they fight and they get back up and then they make it. And it's a really, your story is inspiring. It should probably be in, one of those documentary things that they do on these streaming services. But Danny, tell us a little bit about, you growing up and the world you were living in, growing up as a kid. What was this like for you? Mom, dad, kids, siblings, all that.
Yeah. So everything comes down to environment, right? I as early as I remember, my parents, my dad used to work. My mom was always a hard worker. And I want to say probably maybe that I can remember, maybe 5, 6 years old that I recall my dad being on drugs when I was aware what crack cocaine was. And I used to see him smoking it in the house. I didn't know what it was till years later. And so I want to say that's when I started seeing a lot of different things going on at my house and in the environment that I was growing up in. And, there's vivid memories that I remember. I remember, my dad smoking crack, him buying me toys to play while he was smoking crack. And then, months or years later, I don't know, I remember my mom and my dad fighting and my mom kicking my dad out. And pretty much that was the end of my parents.
Wow. How old would you have been then when that happened?
I think I was like in fifth grade because I moved from one house to another house in fifth grade.
Okay.
And and I want to say that was definitely a turning point for me.
Yeah.
It was a different area, different environment, same city, but just different area. And but for that fifth grade to sixth grade, that's when I started smoking weed, drinking, hanging out with different groups of people. And that's where it all began.
So your
You know,
mom, interesting though, is like your dad moves out, your mom moves. Did you continue to have connections with your dad, or was that just it was a break that, you know, you went on with your life and he went on with his life? And then how did your mom handle being a single mom with you guys? And I forget how many you have, a sister and younger siblings.
At that time, I only had my older sister and one younger brother.
Okay.
So when my dad has been off and on in and out of my life growing up. He was, drinking, alcoholic, on drugs, the memories that I recall, he was in rehab homes. And my mom always was an amazing, is amazing mother to at least try to get my dad into our lives as much as I can. But it's just when somebody at that time is going through drugs and alcohol and crime, being around their kids is not the most priority at the moment.
Yeah.
And my mom, she did the best that she possibly can to support us. And she was just a hardworking lady that went to work in the morning, got off in the evening, and we were just like, hey, here's the food at the house, and you microwave the food, and that's how growing up was. So I went to jail.
Well, Danny, was she aware? Because it sounds like she was working a lot and trying to keep, you guys clothed and fed. And was there any indication to her that you were falling into this world in sixth grade where you were running with the wrong people and getting into drugs? Did you guys ever talk about that? Or was that just kind of a separate, you lived your world and she was living hers, and that you really didn't cross waves that way?
Well, it started small, right? First, you start, I wasn't getting good grades in school.
Yeah.
Then I wouldn't show up to school, and then maybe they caught me ditching. And then you're having to go through Saturday school, and
right.
And so drastically, I started getting in trouble more and more. And I feel is she became very maybe in denial at some point, and
sure.
but I mean, she was very strict with me to a point where I feel that she decided just like, hey, give up. You can drink here at the house, you can smoke here at the house. I'd rather have you at the house versus in the streets.
Yeah.
But and it just got worse every single year from fifth grade.
So did you feel like in that world, Danny, that you had found, like, was it a security piece for you to be able to run with those people and be with that gang? And did that feel like family? Did you feel like you were kind of in your place, or did you feel like an interloper, an outsider? What was in a teenager's brain? Like, what's going on in your brain at that time?
So, we didn't know any better. We were just, we played sports when we were young. Like,
yeah.
I grew up around a group of guys, maybe like 10 guys, or maybe that we all went to middle school. We all went to elementary school together, and then we went to middle school, and we were all good kids.
Yeah.
But as I look back, I remember, some didn't have their dad, and then others dads were strict. Their parents were stricter, and we played sports, and then we just started like getting into trouble year after year, and then like seventh, eighth grade is when the gang stuff started getting. We started getting involved in the gangs.
Yeah.
And it was like we all grew up together and got involved in this gang environment all together. And then throughout the years, it just started getting trickling away. They, one goes to jail, one goes to juvenile hall, one, is getting sentenced to, looking at a juvenile life. And then you got, I lost my first friend at 16. So it just started every year, it just started getting less and less.
So did you feel like, losing somebody at 16, I mean, was it scary? I mean, I'm sure it was sad, but did seeing people go in and out of juvenile and was that something that you were looking at and saying, gosh, that's probably going to happen to me? Or did you think, no, I'm going to be able to get away from this, or you just saw that as your life?
That was my life, and I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved being involved in the streets. I loved being around the criminal activity. Mm-hmm. I didn't have any other environment, so that's all I knew. Mm-hmm. And I knew that I was going to go to jail at some point, because that's what we do. Happened. We go to jail.
Right.
So I always been hungry, ambitious. It's just that I didn't have the right people around me to give me the positive stuff to say, hey, go to school, not go to school, but maybe, start a business,
right?
Read these books. It was all negative, bad environment that we were around, that I was around.
Well, and like you said, Danny, that was your environment. You didn't know anything else. And those people were people that you were probably looking up to, that people were making stair steps of becoming more powerful or getting in, creating more wealth. I mean, probably there was people that had money in that environment. I mean, I can see how all that happens. I talked to a lot of different people on this show that get into that world, and it becomes very normalized. It's not like, correct. Oh boy, if over here, I went, to sleep over at a friend's house, and, they had dinner and went to a movie, and you didn't see that. It was just, you were living a whole different environment, whole different life, whole different set of mentors, which is kind of more than interesting and fascinating about how you created a life for yourself after everything happened to you in a bad way. But let's step into that. You're 18 years old. Now you're in a world where if something bad happens, you're treated as an adult. Can you walk us through how that nightmare came to you?
Yeah. So, I was involved in drugs and selling drugs, since I was like 15 or 14, I don't even know. And then every year it just got worse with the severity of drugs, 16, 17, 18. And I didn't realize the type of people that I was around, or the types of drugs that carried the sentences that we had.
Yeah.
So I, really sort of stumbled upon people that were involved in the amount of drugs that were being sold that were at a federal level.
Yeah.
So I didn't know anything about a federal level. I didn't know anything about a federal prison. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I go to jail, I go away for 2 years. I do halftime. I come back out. We can do it again. Not a big deal. So I started getting involved in selling methamphetamine, at like 16. And then it's just first I went to LA County jail, and I did about 30 days, and that felt like the end of the world.
I bet.
And I'm like, this is the worst. I never want to go out. I never want to get involved in prison again, or jail, all the stuff that happens in there. And but while I was away, there was still a federal indictment that was being, and it was still going. So I just came out, and it's like really nothing changed, because there was still a federal indictment. I just disappeared for 30 days.
Okay.
I was involved with a guy that went to New York, that we were selling them some drugs, and he cooperated with the government. So when he came back, he was already a confidential, a CI, and he was already working for the government. So when I came back, I got out of LA County jail, and we were back in business. And before you know it, within 6 or 7 months, that I got out like in March. By October, I was already facing 15 years in federal prison.
So so the day that this happens, Danny, because I guess you might have, did you have any idea that you were being investigated, that you had a CI? Did you feel like there was a hot trail on you, or were you totally taken by surprise?
Everything was a joke to me.
Okay.
I didn't realize what I was doing carried that much time. I thought it was all fun and games. I used to see them watching me and I used to follow them, the DEA, and I didn't realize that they were, that it was so severe. And I mean, I already knew they were watching me. I just didn't know. I didn't realize how serious it was. And then October 14, 2004, the DEA and the ATF and the local police department raided my mom's house. And I would never forget that day when they came into my mom's house with rifles and put everyone on the ground and everyone screaming. And all I remember is my mom saying, "You got the wrong guy. You got the wrong, you're looking for his dad."
Yeah.
And they're like, "No, we're looking for Junior." And that day changed my life. That day was, that day was the biggest day, that changed my life. And I remember going outside, they handcuffed me and I'm outside handcuffed and the DEA saying, "Hey, you're going to do some time." I'm like, "No, I'm not." Mm-hmm. He's like, "You're going to do some time." And he's like, you're not going home. You're looking at, 10 to 15 years. And I just laughed at him. I'm like, whatever, still, I didn't know anything about the DEA. I didn't know anything about the feds.
But you experienced a hell of a deal with people breaking in and your mom and the whole, I can't imagine how traumatic that would have been at that moment. And then your mom saying they got the wrong guy. I mean, that's something you see in the movies. So let's do this. Let's take a break here because I want to get back into, after we do this quick break, talk about what the next steps happened in your life and how that changed part of your life, ends up going to prison. Our new sponsor on the show is, and this is a guy I could have used when I was going through my stuff. It's AaronDuncan.net. It's a full-service global communications agency. Aaron believes that communication is everything. In the absence of communications, rumors and fake news fill the gap. Either you communicate or people will communicate for you, says Aaron Duncan. He's an expert in the field of public relations and is dedicated to maintaining a positive public image for brands, organizations, and individuals across the country and around the world. At AaronDuncan.net, their job is to make bad news go away. They're known as the trauma surgeons of brand crises, corporate scandals, high-profile litigation, legal investigations, and prosecutions. To be in the public eye in the 21st century is to experience a crisis. It is no longer a question of whether a crisis will strike. It's a question of whether you will be prepared when it does. Aaron's services include crisis management, crisis communication, media relations, reputation management, positive public relations, prison consulting, and coaching. For a confidential consultation regarding crisis or reputation management, advisory role, media interview, or speaking engagement, please contact Aaron at AaronWDuncan@gmail.com or text or phone 636-236-5071, AaronDuncan.net. I could use that guy. I could use that guy, Danny. And actually, Aaron was on the show a few episodes back, and he's done well for himself, but he really goes into the world and helps put, because of his journey that he was on, helps out all kinds of people, from celebrities to people that are in crises or getting ready to go to prison. So he is a new sponsor on our show. Welcome, AaronDuncan.net. Okay, so Danny, let's get back here. You're taken away in the car. You think it's not a big deal. The guy tells you it is. This is a big deal. 10, 15 years. What happens next?
I go to downtown Los Angeles to Metropolitan Detention Center. They take me in. I'm seeing marshals. I'm like, this is not like LA County jails. It's totally different. Mm-hmm. And it took about maybe 24 hours to finally get checked in. And at that time, I still was not sure because if I recall, it took me a few weeks before I even got my first phone call. And to get arraigned, to see the judge.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, I walk in, they book me, they put me in the holding cell. We're not really allowed to use the phone. And I think like within 24 hours, I hit the module, and, right away it's who you run with, right? You go with your race, right?
Mm-hmm.
And me being involved in gangs and Mexican gangs, I mean, we follow suit in there. There's no question. But it felt like, you know what? It was normal because this was my life. I was around gangs. It was normal for me. It's just like, it was just different because I was now in jail.
Yeah. So did you get a public defender, or did you have an attorney that came to your defense? How did that all work for you?
So I first had a public defender, and one of individual that was on my case had someone from the same office, and so that was a conflict of interest.
Okay.
So they appointed me. It was not the public. It was the ones that do it for the pro bono.
Yeah, pro bono.
It was bono. So I ended up getting a really, really good attorney that gave me a lot of great advice on prison and my sentence, because the public defender wanted to take this to trial, and I was all in for taking it for trial. I didn't understand that there was a 98% conviction rate in the federal system.
Right.
And I was like, we're going. He's like, we're going to go on trial. We're going to do this. We're going to put your mom on. I'm like, let's do it. And when I finally got appointed to the other attorney, she said, "You're freaking crazy.
Yeah, you could be gone forever." Yeah,
yeah, we're no way we're going to trial. And I never forget. She's like, "Look, as a mom, I would tell you to cooperate, but as your attorney and working with the cases I have worked with, take your time." And that was really scary.
I bet.
At 18 years old.
18 years old, looking at 120 months, 10 years is...
I thought my life was over.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Thought my life was over. I'm like, I'm going to come out when I'm 30. I'm going to be old.
At 30, exactly.
Like,
at 18 years old, 30 looks old.
Exactly.
So, Danny, when you get in there and you get sentenced, do you know that you're getting what your sentence is going to be? Like when you're standing there, is it already been worked out, or is it holding your breath, wondering what the judge is going to say?
So since I went to LA County Jail prior, and I had a prior, not for drug, but I had regarding theft and cars. So I already had a history, so that changed me on the bracket of the chart.
Points.
So now I wasn't a first-time offender. So that 10 years was the mandatory minimum. So they wanted to give me 13 years because due to my crime, my past, and it being that I was still on probation, I was in state probation, and that I was just recently arrested. So it took about 14, maybe 15 months to finally get sentenced. And that whole 12 months, 15 months, you're in limbo. You don't know. You go to court every 3-4 months. You go to court, and then they say a few things. They said, "Hey, come back in a few months." And that's how it was for the whole 12, 15 months.
And that's got to seem like forever, Danny, because you're not at home. You're in jail, which is one of the worst places to reside while you're waiting for something that's going to change your life it's not going to be in a good way, but you just don't know how long it's going to be. So you're going bouncing back and forth for that 15 months. They finally bring you in. What happens that day?
I want to say that I already signed a plea agreement for 120 months, and that was like a deal. And mind you, like, I'm with these guys that are facing 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So they're like, take the 10, dude, you got a deal. Take the 10. It was really interesting because I was so young and I tried to get bail. I wasn't able to get bail. My mom didn't have a house at the time. No one wanted to put a house up to let me out. So this 12, 15 months that I was in there, I was prepping to do time.
Yeah.
And I was getting coached, getting mentored, right?
Mm-hmm.
By these guys that were prepping me to do my sentence. I just didn't realize that.
Right.
And like, they were like, hey, you're going to be young. They were helping me get through this. You're going to be young. You're going to be healthy.
Got your whole life ahead of you. Right.
Yeah. So I'm like, you know what? 10 years, let's do it. Like, I'm like, you know what it is? So when I signed the agreement, there was still in denial. I'm like, maybe I can break the mandatory minimum, but you can't. And my attorney said, hey, we're going to go in there. We're going to get you the 10. But, just so you know, there's a good chance that they can give you the higher scale of it, which is going to be 13 years. And I get very emotional because, it's a blessing to be where I'm at today in my life.
Yeah.
And I remember my mom cried when I got sentenced, and everyone cried. And, the judge gave me 120 months.
Wow.
It felt like the end of the world.
And I know it's such an emotional day too. I've, everybody who's experienced that time, Danny, you vividly can see it and feel it. And yeah, it's my day was, was a packed courtroom and 3-ring binders for 6 people getting indicted and charged and sentenced. And it's just, it takes your breath away. My wife tells me that she could hear the air coming out of me because, I was, my deal was from probation 0 to 5, and I got 5, and she maxed out, I think, everybody except for one person. And it just hits you like you just feel it. And there's no other experience like it. I don't know. Maybe there is. I haven't experienced another feeling like it. And that your family, you and I talked about this before we got on. When you go to prison, your family goes to prison. They have to deal with the time that you do on the outside, and you deal with the time on the inside. What happens after this day?
I get sentenced. I get a really quick minute speech to tell the judge. And I remember the judge, they had a nickname for him, Let Him Go Let's, right? And he didn't let me go.
He didn't follow his nickname, right?
And he gave me a speech about how to do prison time and how I was young and that I was going to get a second chance and that I was going to be young and that if I took the right steps that I would be able to do something when I got out. And it was a long speech that he gave me. But I was honestly, after 16, I don't know, like, I don't recall if it was 12 or 15, 16 months it took to get sentenced. I was relieved and I was happy to get sentenced to do this time and start my journey.
Yeah.
And as crazy as it sounds, when you get back to the dorm, you're like, hey, I got sentenced. I'm ready to start this journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think some of that, Danny, is you're just so worn out through the whole process. And
correct.
Going to prison is better than being in county jail. I mean, that's for sure. That's so transitory. There's so many weird things that happen in county. Not that weird things don't happen in prison, but people are living there. That's their life there, and things and rules are different. What prison did you end up going to?
So I first went to Victorville.
Yeah.
And I stood there for about a month. And that was at the time, that was like a hub. So first of all, I didn't know where I was going, right? We don't know. And I'm 8, I'm 19 at the time, man. And I'm like, I'm around guys that are 50, 60, and they're like, we just got back from Leavenworth. We just got back. They have the black box on them. They're doing double life. And I'm like, what the F is this?
Yeah.
And the guy that I was chained up with, he got 30 years for kidnapping. And so I'm like, where am I going? It's my first time. Did they maybe send me to the wrong place?
Yeah.
So I go to Victorville. I didn't know at the time that it was just a holding facility.
Yeah.
So from there, I stood there for about a month, and then I got transferred over to Lompoc. And then from there, I stood there for about 6 months, because I was supposed to go to the low, and then it was supposed to go to the camp, but my points got all messed up. So they put me to the New Rock, which was a medium at the time. And they just made it went from a USP to a medium. And then I got stuck in there for like 6 months in the hole till they reevaluated my points. So was
Danny. Like, what an entry.
It was crazy, because the guys and the people that I was around was like, holy fuck, is this how this gonna be?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there was like literally riots that just happened. And it was just like, oh my, it felt like a movie, like this kid that's never gonna get out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they call the mediums the gladiator schools because there's just enough going on that everybody can get hurt.
And it was just, it was just crazy.
How did you handle being in the hole for 6 months? I mean, I can't imagine that as an entry, because I mentioned Aaron Duncan, who's one of the sponsors of the show. He thought he was going to a camp. Parents dropped him off. They said he could bring in white tennis shoes because he thought he was going to a camp. So and somehow his paperwork gets messed up, and he ends up in a medium. They beat him up over his shoes, and he ends up in the hole for 3 months. His family doesn't hear from him for 3 months because they think he's at the camp. Did you, in those 6 months, did you talk to anybody? Was there any communication? I mean, what's going on in your world when you get locked into that world?
So I recall like being in this, and remember at the Lompoc Medium, at that time, it was like the old, like prison for the military or the service or something, right? So it was old. It was over 100 years old. Windows were broken, bars. It was extremely cold.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it was, knowing now, it was all mindset.
Yeah.
To handle the day-to-day, because the way I am out here is the way that I was in there. We worked at, we once the doors cracked at 4 a.m, we got up in the morning and we cracked it. We're like, how many people are going out? 1 or 2. Well, for us, we have to go out no matter what. If we don't go out, we're going to have some problems with, or I'm going to have some problems if I don't go out by my own people.
Yeah.
So no matter what, if it was raining, pouring out there, we're going out there and we're going to go out there and do some burpees. That's just routine. And I remember used to be scared. I'm like, I got to make sure I'm up, because if I don't get out of this cell and go out, I'm going to get in trouble for not going out.
Yeah.
And it was a routine. It was, I got out, we went out, we worked out, came back to the cell. I did my bird bath. We had our breakfast, we showered, we slept, we read, we did our showers at 3 o'clock. So it was all just a routine that I went through, and playing, reading books, reading cards, throwing stuff down the tiers, talking to guys in the tiers. And it was just a routine that I had to build myself to have a really strong mindset to be in this cell for so long.
Do you think that, I mean, one of the things I think is so incredible when you go through something like that is really amazing what you can adapt to, what you truly can adapt to. You can adapt, it's what you walked into. Obviously you weren't expecting. You fell into a routine and got yourself into the mindset that whatever happens, I'm just going to make this work. because there's, I always say there's two different people in prison. There's the ones that you're seeing trying to make it work, and there was the ones that give up. There's really not any in between in prison. And you can see the ones that have given up, and you can see the guys that are trying to make it work. Once you got out of that hole, for 6 months, how did you enter the prison world? Like, what was what strategies were you thinking, Danny, walking into the yard?
Well, I still really didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
I didn't know what was coming. I didn't know. All I heard was stories and how to do prison time. And I remember, I used to, have like a lot of older guys that been in and out of the prison that just tell me, hey, don't do drugs, stay clean, don't drink, and just, basically stick to your word, be a man of your word, and just shut up. There were these guys that were coaching me how to do my prison time. So when I hit the yard, I really didn't know what to expect. Just to follow suit with your car, right? The people that you're with, but it became just a routine. And, at some point it took me a while to get a job. And then from a job, it would work out, job, come back, shower, and then I was just always constantly reading.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a program, and I stuck to this program for years.
So that was your strategy. Get a good job. What kind of job did you have, by the way?
I had multiple jobs. I was working at the kitchen. I was sweeping. I was cleaning the dorms. Every year was always different. It just depends on the season and the time of the job. And
one thing I thought about prison jobs is if you could get a decent prison job, it definitely made the time go quicker. And I worked in the food warehouse, so I felt like I come from a business world, so I was the clerk of the warehouse. I had to keep inventory and those, but it kind of made me. I got forklift certified, so I was thinking that I'm doing things that are keeping me engaged. And like you said, working out, but it's incredible how you get into these routines. And the thing I think that's good and bad about routines is those routines truly become your will, because those are the things that you do to get your time, but you get a little weird with it too. Like, you don't sit in somebody's spot. You sit in the same place there. All those different weird things that happen in prison also, I think, make people, I saw a lot of people become really fearful about getting out, because they get, even though they hate that comfort and that routine, that becomes their, it's like it puts its arms around you. And then the thing you become unfamiliar with is being on the outside. So it's a weird world, because you don't want to lose yourself in prison. That was my fear. I want to be Brent. I don't want to lose me, but you also want to do things that help you get through your time. And it sounds like to me that you kind of figured out. But one thing I was thinking though, Danny, because you were gang related on the outside, how did that work for you on the inside?
Well, I ran with the Sureños, Southsiders, and there's no other choice. That's who we had. That was me.
Yeah.
And that's the people that I hung around. So it came with the stuff that happens.
Right. And there's a lot of stuff that happens.
A lot of stuff that happens. And with the grace of God, I was able to dodge a lot of stuff, because I would get somewhere and they were already locked down, and I missed a lot of stuff that I'm so grateful for.
Yeah.
Because there was guys that I would get there that said, I was going home tomorrow. I was going home this week, and now I'm facing another 10 years. And I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah. That happens a lot.
Exactly. And I was already prepared to come out. I'm going to do all my 10 years. There's no doubt. I'm going to do all my 10 years. I had to program myself to forget about the outside world. And that's like what, it's good and bad, because I become a little bit too cold at time, because I'm just so nothing bothers me. And that human side sort of disappears.
Yeah.
But I'm so programmed in this routine over, it's like the outside world didn't matter to me. This is my world. This is my life right now.
Yeah. It's, there's a guy, I think his name's Devin West, he was a athlete quarterback, went into prison. It was drug related. And he talks about this older guy that had been in prison. He was having a hard time. He was getting in fights, going to the hole, and he said, "Man, you're making your time hard." He said, you got to think of prison. He said, it's like a boiling pot of water. He said, I put an egg in that water. He said, what happens? And David said, well, I guess the egg gets hard. He said, yeah. He said, you can't get hard in here because you lose yourself. He said, now I put a coffee bean, or no, I put a carrot in the water. He said, what happens to it? He says, it gets soft. He said, you can't get soft because you got to still maintain, that feel look that you have to have while you're in. He said, I put the coffee bean in the water. He says, what happens? And Dev said, I'm not following. He said, the coffee bean changes the water, not the water changes the egg or the carrot. He said, that's what you got to be in prison. You got to change the water. You got to be the change so you don't lose yourself. And I think that's kind of interesting analogy, because you get too hard, like you're talking about, Danny, in prison, you lose yourself. You get soft and you can lose yourself too. You get killed. So it's kind of a weird dynamic in prison of how you live in that world, but become someone that can get through it. And sounds like to me that you figured out how to navigate the way that you wanted to live that. And the total amount of time that you spent in there was how long? Because I know you do 86% of you have good time.
About 8 years, a little over 8 around there, and then like 8.5 with the county time. Like it's like around there. Yeah, it was like roughly around there, a little over 8. And then eight and some months, and then the halfway house and all that stuff.
Did you feel like, Danny, as you were going through, did you feel like you were changing? Did you think that prison was changing you? How did you live that life in that amount of time? That's a long time. I was 3 years. You did 8 years. That's a lot more time. How did you move through it?
So it took about close to 2.5 to 3 years to decide I wanted to change, because I was still just like drinking, hanging out, like we were young. So like, I'm like hang out after work, and just like, it felt like I was just in the streets, to be honest with you, because just hang out with the homies, after.
Right.
And it took about 2.5 years to say, I want to change and come out better than how I came in. And that day was when somebody gave me a book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
Yep.
I was reading this novel, like, I don't even know what novel it was, but he's like, what are you reading? Stop reading this. And I never forget this guy, because this guy, Billy from New York, changed my life. And he goes, stop reading that junk. I'm like, what do you want me to read? That's all we read. And he's like, read this. And then he was like, after you read that book, I'll maybe give you another book. And I'm like, okay. And then I read it, and I was just like, what is this? This is amazing.
Yeah.
Think and Grow. And then from there,
what was the biggest message you got out of that? Because that's one of my favorites. What was you, after you read that, what were you thinking, Danny? Think and Grow Rich.
It was all on my thoughts.
Yes.
Thoughts on, what my thoughts were and how to change my thoughts. And that book, that was the biggest game changer, because then from there, I wanted to read more. Yeah. And it's like I never even knew what that first I never read, and then you throw me this book, and I was just like, oh my God, and I just wanted to read more. Then it went from Zig Ziglar, Les Brown, and these guys, these personal development books helped me get through my sentence.
Yeah. Tony
Robbins, Zig Ziglar, Les Brown helped me through his readings, get through my time with the mindset, and it was just.
And you were getting educated on all the good stuff,
I was getting educated, and I was loving these books, and I was reading, constantly reading and growing. And then, I learned about Tony Robbins, and I'm like, who the hell is this guy? And then my reading material became different, and then my mindset became different. And then I wanted now to be every day was like, I want to be better than yesterday, and I want to come out better than how I came in. And that was my mission.
Love it. Love it. You know, and all those things really roll right around to people, places, and things. You know, if you change those three things, and that changes your mindset. You know, one of my favorite quotes on mindset is Henry Ford. It says, "Whether you think you can or think you can't, you are right." And it's very cool that you read that book, and it was a game changer, changed your life, and then you just started, you know, basically vacuuming in everything else that was in there. So as you were living in there, reading these things, did you hang around with different people? Did you do different things in there? What happened in your world?
I mean, you become close to people. So you have, you know, I mean, you run around with a group of guys, but they become your brothers, they become your friends. So I didn't stop hanging out with people. I still hung out with people, but it was to a minimum, and I would hang out, go read, work. So I just had,
You're just doing a lot of what you were, and reading a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And I would just stay busy throughout the day. And that's how I did the time.
So Danny, when you got closer to the door, did you start thinking about, you know, you're reading all the greats, you know, for creating business. What did you start thinking? I'm going to do something when I get out that's much different than when I came in. Like, did you start formulating in your mind something's going to happen?
I did, but I didn't.
Okay.
I'm like, well, I'm going to open up a business, or I want to do a business, and I want to do this, but I really didn't have like a business plan or like an actual business that I wanted. But after reading all this stuff, you're like, hey, you want to do certain things. But I remember a friend of mine in there, he's like, you should get into real estate. And I'm like, well, what's real estate like? And then we would be walking the yard, and he'll be telling me, yeah, when I was out, I was buying houses. And then, he was buying houses with all the drug money. So he would educate me on what a real estate agent was, broker, mortgage lender. And I didn't know anything. I didn't know what an agent was. I didn't know what a broker was. I didn't know anything about real estate. So I'm like, okay, well, that seems pretty cool. That seems like real estate seems pretty good. Everyone does real estate. So I'm like, I want to get into real estate. So I still didn't know what type of real estate I wanted to get into.
Yeah.
I just said, I'm going to do real estate. And I'm like, all right, we'll do real estate.
So you finally get to that point after all this time you're in there. Tell me about the day you walk out.
So, all I wanted was a coffee, a Frappuccino from Starbucks.
Okay.
So my mom picked me up. My mom picks me up at the bus station. I'm supposed to take the bus to the halfway house. So I had like 12 hours to get there. My mom picks me up, and then I get like 7-8 hours to mess around before I go to the halfway house and turn myself in. So I'm like, I wanted a pizza, and I wanted like a Frappuccino, and I got like a caramel Frappuccino. And that was the first place I went when I got out. I wanted an iced coffee. And then from there, my mom took me to my house, to our old house. Mm-hmm. And I told her I didn't want anyone there. I didn't want to see anybody. Mm-hmm. And, mom not knowing any better and knowing what I know now is that I had a huge panic attack. Okay. Going back to the same house, seeing all these people, seeing stuff in the house that didn't change, seeing people that just looked older and heavier and that were growing up. And I'm like, what the heck? It felt like a movie. Mm-hmm. And I had this big panic attack. And I started just hyperventilating because I'm like, I don't want to be around anybody. And everybody was freaking out. They're like, what's wrong with them? Does he not want us here?
Yeah.
And it wasn't them. It was me.
Yeah.
I wasn't ready to see all those people. I didn't want to see all those people. Even though I loved my family and everybody, I didn't want to see anybody.
Yeah. That's interesting. And, the thing that I think about all of that is that you desperately want out. And there's nothing better about getting out, but it's so hard to adjust, I always say it's like jumping in a moving car. All these things have changed and everybody's looking at you. Are you the same? Is he different? Is he some kind of prison creature? All these things that you're thinking in your head. You're like, what am I going to do? How am I going to live? How am I going to get a job? I got to go to this halfway house. I hope that I don't, all these things are just rushing all at once. And you feel like everybody's looking at, gosh, he's got to be so happy. Absolutely. Absolutely. But there's 1,000 things going on in your head about how do I get back into life?
Exactly. And I was so young. I didn't have an email. I didn't know how to email. I didn't know how to ride a bus. I didn't know how to text somebody. I never done that. All I was I ran around the streets all day. I sold drugs. I partied, and that's all I did. I didn't know anything. So coming out was extremely hard because I was like a baby trying to learn how to do all this stuff.
Yeah. It's like putting a baby at high school level.
Exactly.
And I didn't think about that though, Danny. It's a really good point. All the technology when you went in has advanced so far, in that time period that you were in, that was the time period where everything happened. What was that like getting back into that?
It was very, very hard for me because I remember like people trying, I didn't know how to dress.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to buy clothes. I didn't know how to sign up for an email. I didn't know how to do a resume. I never worked.
Yeah.
So like a resume, like how do you upload a resume? I would go to dinner with, I didn't know how to order from a menu. People would take me out. I didn't know how to present myself at the restaurant because they're like, you have to have your, like I didn't know how to do any of that. People had to like teach me how to be like normal, and it was very hard for me. And when I was in prison, I didn't understand why it was so easy to come back till I got out, and I realized how easy it was to go back because it was so hard out here. And I would break down. I would literally break down and cry because I was trying to get this shit together out here, and nothing worked. Nothing worked.
I think that's so good for people to hear that, because it's such a common thread. And, a lot of people who've been to prison, they think, does anybody understand? And what you just said, Danny, that is, those are the emotions and those are the feelings.
I didn't know how to have a girlfriend. I didn't know how to date.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to like anything. I was a baby.
So how did you start stepping into who you are now?
So it's all environment. Mm-hmm. It comes back. We started with the environment. I met somebody, a good friend of mine to this day. I didn't know about social media. I didn't know about Facebook, Instagram. And I found somebody on Instagram, Kevin Sturdivant from Case Real Estate out in Orange County. I found him on Instagram, and he posted a photo of his dad that did federal time. So there was a rapport.
Sure.
Hey, your dad did time. I did time. I want to get in the business. And he gave me a shot to work for him.
Cool.
And then from there, he just exposed me to so much stuff and people and seminars that I took the route to go into those different directions.
And then, that's a lot easier said than done too, because all those things you were stepping into, you didn't know. I mean, those are the things, we call this nightmare success because, anything that you want, you have to step through your fears, your nightmares to get to where you want to go. And that means you're stepping out of your comfort zone to kind of set yourself free. But it's not easy because everything that you were doing, Danny, you found somebody that was a mentor, but you had to step into all the unknown.
Exactly. Exactly. And I didn't know how to dress. He's like, you can't come here. Like, you gotta you gotta be like professional in some way. Like, I didn't know how to do anything. It was so crazy.
And it's not easy to get licensed as an ex-felon. How did you work your world around that?
So, and it goes back to when I was a kid. I always had an ambition to do something with my life. I just didn't have the direction. So now I had, I'm 26, 27 at the time. I feel like I know so much from this material that I read, right? I'm like, all
Sure.
right, I can do all this. I didn't know anything. I still don't know anything, right? But so I'm hungry, I'm driven, I'm showing up to this, to his office, I'm working, and I'm being his assistant, and I apply for my real estate license, and well, they denied me.
Mm-hmm.
They said, no, you're on parole or probation,
Yeah.
and you have a felony. They said, just come back when you're done. I'm like, when I'm done, that's 5 years of probation I'm doing.
Sure.
I did all 5 years. I didn't get any breaks. So I'm like, no. And then I would, and I would get denied, and then I would appeal. And it was the longest 15, 16 months fighting for my license. But this is where the mindset, this is where everything that I was probably doing when I was a little kid, I just didn't know. I started visualizing.
Yeah.
And visualizing how I was going to get this real estate license, how it was going to happen, how it felt.
When it happened.
The experience of happening it.
Yeah.
And I went to the Department of Real Estate. They denied me. They interviewed me. And the most important thing is that they wanted to see that I took 100% responsibility for what I did.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to do an interview with them. Then they come back and they give an approval for the commissioner, and they say either yes or no. So I went in front of a judge, the commissioner, and it took me about maybe 3 to 4 hours. He asked me to walk him through my life from when I started doing crime to that day.
Wow.
And I remember going in and out. And because I would be crying, I was getting emotional from the past. And
Sure.
He would say, go out, get some water, come back in. And I had to present my case. And then at the time, like, I'm getting stuff in the mail. They're like, we'll represent you for like $10,000 to fight your real estate license. I'm like, dude, where am I going to get $10,000?
Right.
And I remember being stressed out. And then at some point, I'm like, you know what? No one knows my story better than myself.
Exactly.
So that took about 15 months. And then when I went to the commissioner, I presented my case, and I showed him that I took responsibility. And the lady, I don't know who you'd call, but on the other side, that was their job was to deny me.
Yeah.
She just said, hey, I never forget that day. She's like, I wish you the best of luck. She wasn't even going to go against it.
That's so cool.
And everything was a few months. Everything was a waiting game. So after that day, I don't know if I was going to get my license. I didn't know. I still had to go through him, and they said, okay, we're going to mail you something, and we'll let you know if you're going to get your license. So I just had faith. And, the blessings come from God, and I just had faith, and I just, in my head, visualized how I was going to get my license, that my mom was going to call me, that something came in the mail, and that they're going to say that I got my real estate license. January 2015, I got my real estate license on federal probation.
Wow.
On federal probation. Unheard of. 3 years into probation.
All about mindset.
Got my real estate license.
Yeah. Okay. So,
and that
but I mean, from reading about you, Danny, between then and now, can you walk us through your world? Like, what has happened with you? Because you can Google you and see that you've really done well in the LA market. Walk us through what's going on with you.
So it's been an 18-year journey.
Yeah. You're 37, 38 now, right?
I'm 37. Yeah. But I went through a lot of different stages, because when I got out, what did I want to do? I wanted to party.
Sure.
I wanted to go out and hang out. I wanted to drink. I wanted to be, and then I was 27 out here in the physical world, but I was 18 in my head.
Absolutely. Sure.
So I went through different stages, and how you do anything is how you do one thing is how you do everything. So in order to be successful in real estate, I had to be successful in my personal life.
Right.
So it took me many years. It took me a really long time to clean up my crap
Mm-hmm.
to where I'm at today, because I would drink, I would party, and then if I was going to do this the right way, if I was going to be successful in my life, I had to, if God was going to bless me with the money, the finance, everything that he has blessed me with, I wasn't ready for it. And so like, it took me years to be ready as a young man, as a responsible young man, to receive.
Yeah.
And once I started grasping that, I started just having huge growth in business, personal life, from just regular real estate sales to now doing personal $1 million spread investments.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all school. Like real estate was school for me. It's still school for me. I was learning from investors. I was learning, like it's just been so fun and amazing to be on this journey,
Mm-hmm.
And to know about creating wealth and owning passive real estate. Like I didn't know any of that. It's just insane.
But the thing that's so cool about it, Danny, is you just kept stepping into learning. And I'm sure when you did that and you got a little bit of success, that gave you more confidence. And then you just kept taking those steps, getting more confidence, and where you are now. I mean, it's
and then I would have some success,
yeah,
and then everything would go back to zero.
yeah,
I would have some success, and then all of a sudden the bank account's empty.
yeah.
And I went through that through
Roller coaster.
years, till I found an amazing wife.
There you go.
To be a faithful husband.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I am here today, because I have someone strong behind me. But it's just, I wasn't ready for all. I wasn't ready for it. I was like, do good, but I wasn't really doing good. I was just making money, partying, and it's just like, it was just all. And now I don't drink. It's just we're full on board.
So you just put it all together, and it came to you in pieces. But the thing that I think is something that everybody can learn from is that a lot of people can have those success pieces that you're talking about, and then they'll have a downturn, but they give up on it. You can't give up on it. You got to stay tenacious with it and have what you were talking about, the mindset that I'm going to make this happen. I might have a setback, but I'm not giving up on myself. What's happened with you, Danny, the reason why your story is so fascinating is that you could have given up on yourself with a 10-year sentence. You could be back in the streets living that life, and that day that you came back, you would have just gotten back with everybody. And even though you were 27 and an 18-year-old mind, you figured it out, how to get out of that, and then who you are now and how you've been able to thrive as a business in a world that's tough. I mean, real estate's not easy. I mean, it's just not, especially if you don't have a big foundation of, all these referrals and all the things that come with that. You started from scratch and entered that world and created your own little mini empire of what you had in your mind created. And that's everybody and I told you this before, I was so excited to talk to you, is everybody loves a good comeback story. Because what it does, it gives everybody hope. Everybody has built up prisons in their own mind. The question is, how do you knock them down? How do you get through them? Because it's all relative. Everybody gets stuck. It's what you do when you get stuck. And one of the things I think too is that when you were not even thinking, I'm not going to change, you started reading books where you saw change was possible. And, possibilities is where the mind starts to imagine and grow, is whether that's hope or possibilities or whatever that is, that's what fuels your mind. And I can just see it in your eyes when you talk about it. I can just see that you've got that, whatever that is, that intangible thing, you've attached yourself to it.
Exactly. I created this person.
Yes. And he was always there. I mean, I'm sure you were a leader and a person that people, thought had thoughts of leadership and smarts and all those different things. It's just that you've applied it in a way now that is really rewarding.
Exactly.
So if you think about this, Danny, I always ask people this, what do you think out of everything that you've been through? Because you've been through so much and it's varied so much all through your life. What would be your biggest takeaway through your journey to the listeners out there?
You nailed it right there. And I've been very discreet about my background because I'm in real estate and you have to be professional.
Yeah.
But I am who I am, and I'm an honest guy that has integrity and does things the right way. So, but you nailed it. Is you saying that I have to get out of myself and understand that this is not about me. This is about serving, and this is about being a contribution to the world to let everyone know that anything's possible. And not only that, is that so many people out here are in prison in this world out here that they're stuck in their head. And the blessing that we able to give these people hope and inspire them and know that anything is really possible out here.
Yeah. And you do that, Danny. Your story does that. When we first talked on the phone, that you told me that you felt like the timing was right. And a story like yours, there's no reason to stand away from it. Your story of how you've made your world the way it is very inspiring. It's very inspiring for people. And this podcast goes into 200 prisons on 700,000 tablets. And that's what I'm so excited about with your story is these guys that are listening to this on a Dovo platform, they hear this and say, okay, well, maybe I don't catch that extra charge, the extra 10 years or 5 years or whatever. I can get out. I can make a difference. I need to get set. And it's not going to be easy when I get out, but I can make it. And that's a big deal. It's a big deal. Your story makes a big deal. It's a difference maker.
And that's amazing. I didn't know that it goes into the prison because that would give so many people hope.
Yeah.
Because it's hard.
It's hard.
Like if I go back, it was easy. But if I walk you through this, it was freaking hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to know if I was in that jail cell right now on that cell and I listened to myself and be like, man, I would have so much hope to know that there's a chance after this sentence.
Right. The light at the end of the tunnel is not a train. It's true hope. Yeah.
And that's amazing.
Yeah. Wow. Danny, I love your story. I love that you have pick this time in your life to feel comfortable in sharing this story, because I think it affects people, whether they've gone to prison or they haven't gone to prison. People need to feel that, whatever that is inside, that maybe I can do this. Maybe I can make this happen. I love it. For people out there, if you want to, I love it when you go to brettcassidy.com, leave me a message. Reviews on Apple help promote the show, which always is great. Go to Apple and follow the show, because then it'll just tell you right when the next one comes up. Same way with Spotify, hit the bell. If you're looking for a book out there, I wrote one, Nightmare Success. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart. And check out our sponsors, Auto Plaza Direct and AaronDuncan.net. As I used to say when I was typing my messages back to my people out on the outside, stay strong, and I'll do the same. Danny Navarro, thank you so much, man. Appreciate your story today.
Thank you so much for having me on, and I hope we can inspire a lot of people.
Love it. All right, folks, Nightmare Success, sending out.